Hello everybody, I'm back with another video for you today, and it's time for a Scuffed meta snapshot. Wanted to try and get it out somewhat early-ish into the patch, just so that you guys have a better idea of what's good, what's meta, what other people are playing. There are a few decks here which I've sort of, I think, optimized a bit more than maybe the ladder is currently doing, particularly looking at Northern Realms. I think a lot of people on ladder are not necessarily playing the best version of things like pincer maneuver. I'm sure that'll change in the coming days as some of the pro players have revealed sort of what they think is best in the top 16 tournament this weekend. So a little bit of inspiration from that, from my own ladder experience, of course, as always. There may be some differing opinions between you and I and everyone else. That's always the case with these snapshots. But yeah, with that being said, let's jump into it. So, let's preface this by saying I think this patch, Syndicate, is pretty obviously the strongest faction. I think definitely Nilfgaard and Northern Realms can challenge Syndicate and can sometimes beat it, but I think Syndicate's the faction to beat at the moment, and that's why I've put it in tier 0. It's quite rare that we get a meta where there is a deck that is so broken or so powerful that it just feels a step above even the other very powerful factions and decks. But I think these Syndicate jackpot decks fit the bill, and I'm sure some people would agree with me. And we have different ways you can play this kind of a jackpot style of deck. You can either run the Poisons, the Roland, the Gellert, or you can run Passiflora, and I'll show you both versions of that. Obviously, the Poison brothers are very, very powerful. Were even better, or rather were very good last patch, but are even better now, now that you can over-profit with them. With the jackpot leader, you don't necessarily have to have a spender on board while you're doing the poison broken stuff. So this deck's very, very powerful, I can assure you of that. And we also have a version with Passiflora, which people like Pireball were playing in this weekend's tournament. And this is sort of trading that poison package for the powerful scenario, of course. The common theme with this deck is you have Jacques, you have Sigurruven, you have Caesar. Very difficult to disrupt this combo meaningfully, and it usually is playing for a ton of points. Caesar, of course, triggering the profit of those two units and getting you a bunch of stuff. So you have a bit of a more engine-focused version here, and you can even, I've seen some people even running, maybe a Seductress instead of a Bloody Good Friends if you want even more engines. They can be quite overwhelming in longer rounds, but the poison package is also good. So kind of pick whatever you feel is your sort of style for Syndicate. Both should be pretty good, and I think the best thing at the moment. Then, if you want a different sort of approach to Syndicate, there is also Lined Pockets. This has some matchups which are a little bit better, arguably, than for the jackpot, although I'd say overall it's just a bit weaker. You of course are running Cleaver and some Bounty Givers, the Witchfinder new card. So if you want to play something a bit more sort of inspired by this sort of bounty stuff, then you can give this kind of a deck a go. The idea is to let Witchfinder pop off with things like the Tunnel Drill, the Freak Show, and ideally their removal is going to be a little bit overloaded with the Cleaver as well, having to deal with that. I'd say this deck's quite a bit weaker than Jackpot, but it's still a solid contender, can still get some work done. You could even throw Caleb Menge in here as well, if that's your kind of thing. But yeah, Line Pocket's still pretty good deck, and I'd say tier 1 arguably could fit into tier 2 as well. Next, let's go to Northern Realms. Northern Realms looking very strong. Arguably, actually the second best faction after Syndicate, which is a bit surprising for some people, I'm sure. There's different ways you can do this. Draug is sort of a not very popular way, so I'll show you the Varaxis style first. This will probably see a bit more popularity after some pro players have played it in the tournament this weekend. But this is of course reusing Shani, it's reusing Gerhardt, you've got Foltest in there for that powerful round 1 potential, and yeah, just a lot of threats, a lot of things for the opponent to answer. Casting Contest is a standout card, the Siege is always very powerful. It's Northern Realms, you kind of know this. This version, Cutting Foltest Pride, I'm not too sure how I feel about that. There's other ways you can play this deck, and you can do this sort of approach with the Varaxis, with Foltest Pride, probably. You can equally take out Varaxis, play Foltest Pride, play things like Trollolo as well, I think people have been doing. I'll show you the other version that I have here, which I think is maybe a bit better. Depends, though, on what matchup you're trying to beat. But here we've got Draug Siege, which just gives you an extra win condition. Doesn't have the Foltest. You could consider fitting Foltest. I was also playing with Foltest and Draug, and you can consider doing that and potentially cutting Trollolo reinforcements kind of stuff in the in the lower sort of portion of the deck. So this is another style and approach to Northern Realms. I'd say this is pretty good. There's lots of different cards you can put in, but the sort of theme and core here is Siege, powerful Ballistas, Adalia, just go crazy basically. So yeah, powerful deck for sure. And maybe even the second best in the meta at the moment. Next, let's move on to Nilfgaard. What most people are playing is sort of this typical Bull deck, quite similar to what I played last patch at Masters, actually. Which is quite funny how the meta, turns in that direction. A lot of people are cutting Fergus to play Dead Man's Tongue, and they are essentially, playing Thirsty Dames instead of Aristocrats a lot of the time. You can play Seditious Aristocrats. You can play even Amnesty, I've seen, instead of Coated Weapons Thirsty Dame. You could even experiment with cutting Anna and playing, whatever you feel like there, maybe a Fergus, whatever. There's some cards to play around with. But Bull, pretty straightforward game plan. Play the Masquerade Bull, play some Aristocrats, go crazy, poison everything, kill all the opponent's units, lock them down. I think you know how that works, and it's pretty damn powerful still. So, not too much to talk about there. Nilfgaard looking very strong this patch. Let's move to Tier 2, where we find a lot of the other factions are... We've got kind of 3 factions at the moment that are very good. Nilfgaard, Northern Realms, Syndicate, and then everything else is a little bit struggling. But we've got monsters, we've got Keltulis, it's still a deck. It can still win. It particularly preys upon Northern Realms players, because they don't have efficient ways to deal with the Defender, and Ciri Dash, and all that stuff. It's just a deck that can kind of abuse certain matchups, but gets completely wrecked in others, like Nilfgaard, for example, is going to be horribly painful. Syndicate as well should kind of be wrecking you a lot of the time, especially if they're running Curtain or Reels, which some decks are. But yeah, Keltulis still a deck that you can play. But now we have Force of Nature as well, which is a new sort of up-and-comer. A lot of people playing Koshchi, She Who Knows. There are people who are cutting She Who Knows for things like Egon and Egon Osrael package. And you can consider playing Osrael instead of Alza's Double Cross. Depends whether you want consistency or a bit more power here. You can maybe cut the Doric Array, cut the Alza's Double Cross. You can cut Caretaker as well to play Osrael. Caretaker is sort of a standout as a relic that can purify stuff. Just gives you a nice purify, plays around poisons and locks and everything. Can be pretty decent if you find yourself wanting to have a chance against Nilfgaard, I suppose, but probably not a great matchup for you for the most part. But yeah, monsters has a little bit of a place in the meta at the moment. Hard to say whether monsters or Skellige is better as a 4th faction, but this Koshchi deck has definitely got some points with the Witch Pigs and lots of thriving units, relics and the like. And yeah, Skellige. Speaking of Skellige, we have Reckless Flurry here. This is probably the best Skellige deck out there at the moment. There is also Warriors, there's also Battle Trance stuff you can do. I think that's all kind of relegated to Tier 3, and I'll mention it later on here. But we've got Megascope, Greatsword, just Reckless Flurry with that nice little addition. Just very control-heavy deck. You've got Avalak as well, which got a buff recently. Yeah, is this deck great? I would say probably not. You've got a lot of points, but the deck just doesn't seem to keep up super well with a lot of the power creep that's come in the last expansion. So I would say this deck's, it's probably top 4. It is probably your 4th faction a lot of the time if you don't want to play monsters. But yeah, there's a reason it's in Tier 2 rather than Tier 1 here, guys. I think Skellige's on a little bit weaker than the Northern Realms, the Syndicate, the Nilfgaard. But not a bad deck. Not a bad deck, this one. And here we have a bit of Hyperthin, another approach to Nilfgaard that you can go for that I've seen a lot of people playing. I'm not sure if I've got the build exactly correct. You can fiddle around here. If it doesn't feel quite right, then I would change a few card or two and figure out what's wrong with it. Might not quite have enough thinning, might have too much thinning. You can figure that out. But Hyperthin, the game plan is straightforward. You thin a lot, you clog the opponent a bit, and then you just drop all the massive bombs benefiting from Tibor value. The Yennefer, the Triss, the Zarthisius, the Vilgefortz. Quite a straightforward deck. I think very, very kind of wonky if you're on blue coin. If you're on red coin and Contempo Abuse or whatever, then it can be a very good deck. Otherwise, a little bit wonky. So tier 2 for this one. Vulnerable to tool punish, and quite a few of the decks in the tier 1 decks seem to beat it quite reliably, I would say. So yeah, we've got that, and finally we've got another Syndicate deck here, which is sort of the bounty, the all-in bounty package jackpot, because I know a lot of you probably enjoy just going all in with the bounties and the Witch Hunter Executioners. Not a super bad deck by any means, you can definitely win games with this kind of an approach, but not quite as strong as the other ways to play Syndicate, just going all in with the Jacques and the Siggy and the Caesar, rather than those bounties, which end up forcing you to play some kind of weak cards at the end of the day, which is not ideal. You know, things like 5 for 5 Executioner, 10 for 12 Witchfinder, they can get a lot of value, but they're very conditional, and can be disrupted quite easily. So, now we move to tier 3. That's kind of all of the good decks at the moment. Now we've got the sort of less good decks. You can consider playing things like Nature's Gift, for example, if you're a big fan of Scoia'tael. We've got good old-fashioned Warriors here in tier 3. It's still a deck. You can still win games with it. I wouldn't recommend playing it over Flurry, but you can if you really feel like it. This should probably be a Crystal Skull, I suppose, by the way. But yeah, not a particularly great deck at the moment, I would say. Very power crept at this point. Even Iced got nerfed recently, so yeah, whatever. Nothing really to write home about. But then we have Arrakis Swarm as well. Similar sort of situation here. Arguably one of the better decks in previous patches, and definitely had a lot of potential. Kind of has potential now, you know, you're thinking things like Nilfgaard, you maybe are having a good matchup into, maybe you can beat Syndicate with AQ, but in my opinion I think this deck's a bit too power crept to be doing a huge amount. I might be proved wrong in the qualifiers this weekend, we'll see, but yeah, I would say probably this deck is a bit power crept out, and that's why I put it in tier 3 rather than tier 2. The difference between this and Keltulis is Keltulis can actually just snipe certain matchups and completely destroy them, whereas AQ, you've still got a game on your hands, even if it's something against, you know, even if you're against the likes of a Nilfgaard or whatever, but you're just going to get completely wrecked by Northern Realms, you're going to get completely wrecked by some stuff. So yeah, tier 2 arguably, but I think tier 3 just due to the power creep. You can still play portal stuff if you feel like going that route, but yeah. Then we've got Shield Wall. This is kind of the Patience Mages archetype. Seen some people doing some stuff like this. You can also run it not with Artusa Adepts and Banard students. This is just kind of a more fun Northern Realms deck for you guys. I've seen people doing Foltest Shenanigans, Varaxus and the like though, and Dandelion and whatnot. That's something you might be interested in if you're not a fan of Pincer Maneuver, but I would say Pincer Maneuver is just far, far better and stronger than this, so, you know, it's a lot more consistent, has more power potential with the Siege, so I would stray away from Shield Wall, but it's an archetype, it's a thing you can try if you're interested in that. And then we've got Nature's Gift. Red Rain was playing a sort of, a non-devotion version of Nature's Gift, which is something you can do and something you can consider. You can even consider maybe trying to play Ithne, but this sort of version is trying to maximize the Harold Gord as much as possible. Play things like Avalak for that extra, for the extra proc on the Gord, the Forest Protector, etc. Lots of spells, of course. The Sorceress also very good at activating more Gord value, and yeah, in the end you should be, I mean, Catwitch Adept, I'm not really sure. This deck's a bit janky, it's a bit wonky. You can play Knickers instead of Rockslide, you can play Double Lock if you feel like it. But I would say probably stay away from Scoia'tael if you're being competitive this patch. There is also Elves, there is also Traps. Those are two archetypes you can consider running. I'm not going to show you a Trap deck because fuck that archetype, in all honesty. But no, you can play Traps, you can play Elves. Those are also considerations. I'd say they're probably weaker than this deck though, so yeah, not looking too good for Scoia'tael on this patch, that's for sure. We've got a bit of Battle Trance, just a couple more decks here to, keep you guys entertained. Got a Battle Trance deck here, which is focusing on a little bit of weather, a little bit of Fulmar value, but mostly Alchemy and Gedanuth. And yeah, you're going to be able to replay a 4 provision one with Bride of the Sea, or maybe you can somehow get the decoction if you can really make that work with a Tears of Siren on the board and a Fulmar. A little bit clunky to get that better value from her, but really this is just a sort of, again, Megascopes. A little bit wonky. You can use these on the priests from Gedanuth. You can consider also playing the just the, whatever they're called, the preachers. You can consider just running those in the deck as well. This is not a terrible deck. You've got points, probably just less points and less control and less sort of options than a Reckless Flurry deck. But if you're interested in running some of the newer cards, like the Fulmar, then you could consider giving this a go. It's certainly not too bad, especially with Drakkar being buffed, Megascope possibilities, and the like. You should probably be running, I should say, you should probably run Crows in this deck. I don't know, this is just a bit of a wonky version that I've just built up quite quickly myself, so you can optimize that yourself, I'm sure, if you're interested in it. And last but not least, well, actually kind of least, we have Colgrim. People running Colgrim, just all-in Colgrim with Invocation quite often, and of course Viper Witcher Mentor. I'm not a fan of this build, and I never really have been. It's very weak, I think, from Blue Coin, although Blightmaker is a really good card, so it's kind of pushed, and Dead Man's Tongue, to be fair, in hyper-thin sort of archetypes. Definitely has pushed Nilfgaard into a very playable realm, and even these sort of Colgrim, slightly memeier, binary, should we say, archetypes, even those are seeing some play, so you can give Colgrim a go if that's more your flavor, just the all-in Colgrim, not hyper-thinning, but trying to really clog your opponent as much as possible and make their life miserable. That is an approach you can also take here. So, that wraps it up. That's my Scuffed meta snapshot. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope it's very helpful to a lot of you that might be a bit lost as to what is good at the moment. And I would like to hear what you think. Was I accurate with the decks? Did I miss anything? I know there's stuff like Salamander Jackpot, which I don't have here, which maybe is seeing play. I haven't seen it literally ever myself, so have not included it for that reason. I'm sure there's many more memey archetypes that you can, and fun stuff that you can try. Cintrian Royal Guards, Rat Clog, like all sorts of things. But yeah, this is, I think, the competitive look of the game at the moment. So let me know what you think. As always, thanks a lot for watching, guys. Do subscribe if you haven't already, and I wish you a happy and great day, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.